Welcome back to the You Not Me podcast, where Andrew McCartney and myself, we get a chance to chat with you about making one simple decision, which is you, not me, putting others above yourself and how that translates into an amazing life. So, Andrew, thanks for joining today. As always, it's always a pleasure to have you.
Glad to be here.
Today is actually the 5th episode of a series called Launch Well, where we're trying to help young adults, 20, 30-year-olds. How do you launch well into the real world? How do you live for things bigger than yourself? And today we're going to talk about leadership and legacy and how you truly can step into life and live for something bigger than yourself. So the question we want to start off with is, what are you building that will still matter after you're gone? Most people build a resume, what they've accomplished, they accumulate things, but few build a legacy, who they became and who became better because they lived. So if you contrast the world's chase of degree, promotion, house, platform, followers with the reality that titles, offices, and positions all pass to someone else, the one question that remains, who did you help become better? So we're going to talk about a room full of billionaires. In 2016, a memorial service in Atherton, California, in the room was Tim Cook, Larry Page, Sheryl Sandberg, Eric Schmidt, Jeff Bezos, effectively the leadership of the modern internet, sitting in folding chairs. They weren't there for a founder. They're there for a coach. Their coach named Bill Campbell. Bill Campbell was a losing college football coach at Columbia who moved into the tech industry in his 40s. He ran into it. He sat on Apple's board. He coached Steve Jobs and Larry Page and Eric Schmidt, who met with him roughly once a week for 15 years. And they have said that putting $1 trillion on his impact understates it. He refused payment and equity for the coaching, but also on the same weekends, he was coaching a high school girls flag football team. Here's the thing with Bill Campbell. There's no product, no Bill Campbell company. And the book that exists actually was written by people he coached. Mm-hmm. And I think so often we forget the fact that if we just step into something with a true heart of wanting nothing more than to help other people see things from a different perspective, help them become the best that they can, we can have an impact that not only touches their lives, but touches so many beyond it. One day your life will be summed up in a few sentences by the people who knew you. The only question that matters, what will those sentences say? Young adults now have so many platforms. They have so many voices. They don't know what's true anymore. They need somebody that is speaking into them and cares deeply about how they turn out. Not just being influential to get them to do things, but to be influential to help them see the impact they can have when they lead themselves well as other people. So the big idea of the day is leadership is not a title you're given. It's a responsibility you take, starting with yourself.
And I think another kind of personal example, over the past month, my father-in-law passed away. Mm-hmm. And when you're at a funeral, you have a unique opportunity to hear from a lot of people that kind of were personally impacted, by in this case, my father-in-law's life. And just to see the legacy that he's leaving. And again, I just think it's such an encouragement for the next generation to see. I think back to the Bill Campbell example and the $1 trillion coach book. It were the people that were his kind of students, for lack of a better term, were the ones that wrote that book because they were so positively impacted by it. And I think we all need to recognize and realize that there's going to be a time that people are going to be talking about each of us and what impact are we making. And it doesn't matter how much money is in your bank account, doesn't matter how much stuff you've accumulated. All of that stuff is meaningless. It really gets down to, though, is how can you make, what is the personal impact that we're making on the people's lives that are around us?
Yeah. And most people are waiting to be put in charge before they decide to be a leader. And real leadership is not about being followed. It's about being worth following. Mm-hmm. And legacy is not what you leave behind in trophies. It's what you leave inside of other people. And so some of the things we're going to touch on today about leadership and legacy is how do you lead yourself first, taking initiative and responsibility, resilience through adversity, faith and deeper purpose, and building a life that outlives you. So we're going to dive in. First and foremost, we're talking about leading yourself first.
Well, and I think a great way to start this is an Olympic swimmer. Her name is Katie Ladecki. Mm. A lot of you may know Katie. If you haven't, definitely look her up. My daughter is a swimmer, so whenever the Summer Olympics come around, we always pay very close attention to all the swimming events. She's the most decorated female swimmer ever. 14 Olympic medals, 9 gold, 23 world titles, and she has been driven since she was a young child. And I think the thing that was amazing about her is that she was the one that, if you go back and if you look at videos, or if you remember watching her in the Olympics, she would be in the 1500-meter race, and she was so far ahead that there was not another swimmer even on the TV screen, and so she was really, she didn't have that benefit of having somebody right on her tail. She had to be self motivated, and even during that time, she had no rival to react to. But she was still determined and would push herself, continuing to beat her own world records every single year. And again, I just think it's important as we think about ourselves and think about, okay, how can we kind of self lead and self drive ourselves. And being disciplined is all about not only stating your goals, but really pushing yourself to achieve those.
Yeah, I think, it's such a rarity in the world. And actually, we actually just literally 10 minutes ago, we had our interns here and they did some research. And one of the things, it was interesting, some of the questions were posed to athletes and they felt like they didn't have an issue with self-discipline doing things. But then 95 people that responded were non-athletes. And that's one of the things they said they struggled the most with was self-discipline and consistency. And so I think it's such an amazing thing. And this is why we love sports, is sports teaches that self-discipline, that self-focus. And the people that actually become truly great in a sport or achieve their highest level are the ones that it's not just I'm going to practice because that's when the coach has practice scheduled and I'm going to do my best in front of people. It's the people that are self-motivated and have discipline to go out and train on their own. They'll go, if it's a soccer player, they'll go take 5 balls or a bag of balls and they're going to go out and just do fitness, dribble, shoot, passing off a wall, etc. They find ways to keep pushing themselves even when people aren't watching. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the biggest things at home, at work, and your sports and your school, et cetera, is can you actually hold yourself to a standard? And the days, people joke about leg day, like working out. People hate leg day because it's painful, but who are the ones that don't skip leg day? Who are the ones that say, I'm going to go and torch myself and absolutely, feel like I can't get off the ground and walking up and down steps is so painful, but they're willing to do it day after day because they know those little moments of when nobody's watching, those are the things that are going to separate them, not just when you compare yourself to other people, but from who they were yesterday and who they were a year ago. And that's, I think, the biggest thing with self-discipline is making sure you're becoming better today than you were yesterday or a week ago or a month ago or a year ago.
Oh, well said.
And then next, we're going to talk about initiative and really leaders don't wait for permission to make things better. They just start and they see the need around them. And so, Andrew, in your workplace or do you have any stories of people that have actually taken initiative when nobody's told them to do it and they do it anyway because there is a need and they want to help solve that need?
Now, I can think of just a number of examples. I remember a few years ago in my last company, I worked at Bank of America, and we had a summer intern who, had just incredible ideas and just viewed their job as, hey, I'm here for the summer, but I'm not just here for the summer. I want to make an impact long term. And I think it was just a real encouragement to me just to see an example of somebody who didn't really ask for permission. They basically said, "Hey, I'm here. I have good ideas, and I want to make an impact." And I also think that there are examples just from other companies, and a good example that I've heard over the years is a guy named Spencer Silver and Art Fry. So these are two people who worked for the 3M company, and they inadvertently invented the Post-it note. And this is one where it started off with an example of something that had failed. They basically developed an adhesive and a glue that didn't stick. And what initially started off as a failure ended up, they invented something that we all use every single day, the Post-it note. And it started off with a failed project. They were developing glue and the glue wasn't effective. It wasn't sticking. And they were trying to pitch something for what amounted to 5 or 6 years, and they just didn't have a good solution, and they didn't have a good product. But Art Fry, who again also kind of worked at 3M, he was a choir singer in his local church, and he was having a hard time keeping the bookmark in his hymnal. And he remembered this failed adhesive and, again, like inadvertently invented the Post-it note. And it now became, in the late 1970s, that's when it became a product, and it's something that we all use today. But I think it's an example of initiative in that, hey, they realized that they had a good idea. They had something that was solving a need, and they didn't let up until they took the personal initiative and drive to keep that idea moving forward until it's something that is being used around the world today.
Yeah, there's actually a great example of this in the science world. So I'm sure a lot of people, unfortunately, have heard the term immunotherapy in cancer treatments. And so there's a product called Keytruda that is out there that has literally changed the game in cancer treatment. And what's amazing is that product is about to go off patent right now. But many, many, many years ago, it was actually discovered, and people couldn't figure out how to use it, what to do. And the product actually got shelved for quite a long time until there was another scientist that came along that saw it, understood it, pulled it off the shelf and applied it. And now, if you look at the package insert, as far as the number of indications that drug is used for, I forget if it's like 20 plus different types of cancer. It's amazing. And then the amount of life expectancy it's extended and is well tolerated, et cetera. But somebody said, well, it's not working, so we're just going to stop and shelve it. And then it has turned into this amazing blockbuster product that has helped impact so many people's lives because someone else looked at it slightly differently, had a different idea, but then was not willing to quit on it and said, I'm going to keep going. And so I think so often in life, there are things that they maybe seem out of reach or they're not happening yet, but it's kind of like the story of the stonecutter, right? It's, hundreds and hundreds of times that you're hitting and trying to break that stone. And was it the 101st strike? Or was it all the ones before it that were actually building up along the way? And so I think we just need to remember that there are times that it might be hard, but if it's worthwhile, if it is worthy, and if it's going to solve a problem and a need for other people, and you're doing it with the right heart for the right reason, keep going and don't give up because sometimes it's just like the stonecutter. You just have to do it long enough. And the people that actually stay consistent and show up, even like we said with self-discipline a little bit ago, those are the ones that actually win in the long run. Again, even with You Not Me, if it only helps a few people and it really impacts lives, it's all worth it. And so the hope is we help millions, but who knows? And so I think the most important thing is remembering that just keep going. And I think that leads really well into the next segment, which is resilience. And how do you not only be persistent and keep going, but how are you resilient when there are times that the headwinds or the storms pop up or you're seeing losses, things don't go your way? How do you stay resilient?
Yeah, this is one that I heard. This is back in 2024. Roger Federer was giving a commencement speech at Dartmouth, and some of you may have heard this speech or maybe seen it online, but it was interesting. So he had 1,526 matches, and out of those matches, he won 80% of the matches. Chris, do you know how many points did he win? So when you think about, so he won 80% of the matches, but what percent of the points did he actually win?
Well, you would think naturally he won the majority of them, like 75% or more.
Well, barely. Yeah, he only won 54% of the points.
Barely half.
And so barely half. And that just shows you that when you look at kind of how close, so he's an elite competitor in his sport, one of the, if not the best, one of the top 3-4 people ever to play that sport. And yet he lost almost half his points. And if he didn't have the resilience, and if he didn't have a lot of the things that we've talked about already in this podcast, he wouldn't be the champion that he is, because it's easy to give up. It's easy to mentally lose when you're down. And I just thought that was an incredible example of resilience.
There's also, I heard from somebody I met recently that there's an awesome series on, I believe it's on Netflix, about Rafael Nadal, and the pain that he's gone through with his feet to be able to play tennis and just pushing through and being resilient. But really to talk about kind of I guess you could say a hometown hero, being in Charlotte, and our boys went to school at Charlotte Christian, but Steph Curry, so one of the best basketball players, best 3-point shooters of all time. When he was a freshman at Charlotte Christian, he was 5'7", 130 pounds, and they have two gyms on the campus of Charlotte Christian. They have the upper gym and the lower gym, and the varsity was working out and training in the upper gym, and the JV was in the lower gym. And Steph, because he didn't believe he could play on the varsity as a freshman and being so small, and sometimes is it that we see that ourselves? Is it we hear it from other people saying it or the whispers around us, and we tend to believe it? He said one of his biggest regrets in his career is, instead of boldly and courageously trusting in himself and what he could do and going to the varsity gym, he instead turned and went to the JV gym. And he actually said that when they retired his jersey at Charlotte Christian, he told that story. And when he came out of high school, he was ranked somewhere around 245th nationally. His dad went to Virginia Tech. He wanted to go to Virginia Tech, but they didn't offer a scholarship. And so he ended up going to Davidson because they're the ones that actually offered him a scholarship. They hadn't won a single NCAA tournament game since 1969. In 2008, he took him to the Elite Eight, and the country finally realized who he was and what he could do. And the thing is, sometimes in life, maybe whether it's, going through puberty, you have years to grow, whether it's just you started in a new career and you're having to learn steps along the way, don't compare yourself to other people and say, I can't be X because look at what other people are. Instead, say, I have a passion and desire for this, and I'm going to find every way possible with the gifts I have right now, but also know that, hey, if I want to be a lifelong learner and I want to keep growing and I can critically think and problem solve and figure out better ways to do this or to train myself up or my body, I'm going to do that. I'm willing to sacrifice and do that. And I've seen, even with my own boys and just their time through sports, my time, I was a late bloomer. I was the youngest. I was a year basically younger than everybody in my grade. And it took me a long time to catch up. But that's the thing that's amazing is when you are the smaller person, you have to rely on other things. You have to, in soccer, you have to rely on your IQ, on maybe how can you be smarter and make better decisions, because you're not as fast as everybody, you're not as big and strong as everybody, but how can you find a way to win with what you have? And I think that's just one of the amazing things about us as humans is we can critically think and figure out, well, I want to get here. How do I do that? And what are the steps I need to take? And sometimes we have to crowd out the noise. Like the people, running in a marathon and a race is just listen to yourself and put one foot in front of the other to go towards the goal you want. Don't believe the lies and the yells of competitors or other fans or people that are trying to tear you down, and trust who you've been made to be and what you can do.
Well, and I love that Steph Curry story, because I can just think of so many situations where, where in life are we going to the lower gym? When I think back to that intern example that I gave earlier, it's like you think about your life. What leadership tables are you at today? So it could be in your church, it could be in your job, it could be in your neighborhood, it could be in your school, it could be, a number of different ways. But like, where does God have you in a place that you can make an incredible impact? And you just need to step into that. It's very easy to go and take the easier route and go to the lower gym and to say, hey, I'm not enough and I'm not ready for this. But God has you in a place to make a big impact, and you just need to step into that. And I just think about those examples, think about my own life, and where have I stepped into the lower gym versus I should have stepped into the varsity gym. But I think we all can come back and identify some of those places.
Yeah. I mean, and that's even with me, with you, not me, for a long time. It's like, who am I to do this? I haven't had these massive HR roles like you had globally, and I haven't done all these other things, but it's sometimes you start to shrink back in fear because you think, well, I'm just this, instead of maybe I have an idea. Maybe I have a different way of saying it. Maybe I have a gift that other people don't have. Not me personally, but just whatever your scenario is. And can you step out in that and walk forward faithfully? And that goes on to our next, group, which is faith and purpose. And when everything you built your identity on gets shaken, what's left standing is your real foundation. And that's exactly what I found in 2008-9 when I thought I built this great foundation of, real estate wealth and all these other things. And then when the real estate fallout happened, everything got shaken away and I got a chance to see what was my life really built on. And so I think,
Mm.
I mean, there are so many things in life that have happened between both of us, but understanding is, what is your true foundation that cannot fall away, that you can stand upon, that will weather
Mm.
every storm, but also out of that foundation, how do you, what is your purpose and how do you walk forward in
Mhm.
life?
And I think a neat example of this is Truett Cathy. And when I think about Truett Cathy, he's the founder of Chick-fil-A.
Mm,
And depending on where you live, Chick-fil-A is wildly popular in the Southeast, and actually, it's getting popular all over the U.S. But he's somebody that for his first restaurant that he opened, he made a decision that he wasn't going to be open on Sunday.
mm,
And he made a decision before he even opened the first Chick-fil-A that he wasn't going to be open because one, he wanted to honor God and wanted to honor families, and he wanted to love on his people so that they could have a day of rest. And I love that. I mean, even though I don't love it on Sundays when I want a Chick-fil-A
right.
sandwich, but I think it's just a really good example of somebody that he basically was really focused on faith and purpose, and how can I provide a great guest experience for people coming to my stores. How can I provide a great workplace experience, and how can I honor God? Chick-fil-A is about as popular as, if not more popular, than restaurants that are open on Sundays, and they're outperforming those as well. To show that when you focus on faith and purpose, you can have a successful business and still achieve your goals and missions.
Yeah. It was interesting this morning, actually. I was sitting out on our back porch and my oldest son was sitting out there and there was a section, it was in Isaiah 38 where basically was talking about trials that a king had been through and how he was thankful for how the Lord used those trials. And so often the trials we don't want trials. We want a smooth sailing, good time, 73 degrees, sunny, etc., slight breeze. But actually the storms are the things that actually shape us the most and actually strengthen us the most. And I was talking to my son about it and sharing the scripture verse and I said, I am, I do hate that you've gone through those hard times because for those of you that don't know his story, he had 4 major injuries in college, 3 surgeries, and he was out for literally almost 2.5 years. And it's been, as a father, it's so hard to watch because you don't want your kids to struggle. But he said to me, and I say the exact same thing about 2008, 9 is he's like, actually, I'm not sad about it happening at all. It's actually one of the best things it's actually truly one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And to know what he went through during those times and to see him day by day and to see where he is now, had he not gone through those hard times, he wouldn't hold soccer so loosely and he wouldn't have as much empathy as he does for other people. He wouldn't, so many things, he would nowhere near be where he is today had he not gone through those. And it was one of the hardest things as a father to watch your child suffer. And any parent that loves their child knows what I'm talking about. If they've seen them suffer, even if it's just, just hard relational things, much less hard physical things. And it's sad because we don't want those hard times. But just like trees, in order for trees to to grow strong, they need the wind to push against them so they can actually build up all the strengthening fibers that make them stay tall and strong and also to grow deep roots. If we don't have the wind, the trees don't grow deep roots. And then when any breeze or slight storm comes, that tree topples over. Same thing with us as people is, can we embrace those hard times and can we make sure that, hey, the whole foundation I'm standing on, and for me, it's my faith that the Lord's got this. He's sovereign and he cares and he is a good father. He is a perfect father. He loves me and he loves my boys and my wife more than I ever even remotely could. And so why am I afraid when they're going through a hard time if I know that he's walking with them, or when I'm going through a hard time, that knowing that he's walking with me.
Mm.
And then the purpose of just helping people see hey, you're loved just as you are. Now, that doesn't mean that we should never learn and grow. So we should always try to help people grow and become their best. But regardless of what they've achieved or what they've done in their past, can we love them anyway and make sure that they know that they matter just because they are versus what they've actually achieved?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so finally, the last bit we're going to chat about is just legacy. And legacy is not what you leave behind for people; it's what you leave inside of them. And how have you built into them? And kind of like whether it's any of our kids or Steph Curry or whatever, can we, instead of letting them listen to the voices outside that don't care about them, can we see someone and help them see the greatness that's in them that maybe they don't even see in themselves?
I think a great example of this, Chris, is a guy named Fred Rogers. And I'm talking about Mr. Rogers,
Mr. Rogers.
From Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I can't think of another person that has had a more of an impact on children's television, children's programming. Most of the people that are our age were raised were raised by Mr. Rogers in some way, shape, or form. But I think about this: May 1st, 1969. There was a Senate subcommittee, and it was a public hearing on funding for public television, and they were about to, basically lose about half the funding to public television. And Mr. Rogers, he's a Presbyterian minister from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he walked into the Senate hearing in his cardigan sweaters that his mom had made, and he was just calmly talking about this is what he was seeing in public television, and what he was seeing was television that was emerging for kids that was not encouraging. It was not uplifting. It was silly. It might be entertaining, but it wasn't encouraging. It wasn't positive. And he had a lot of truth that he had from his pastoral job that he wanted to love and speak truth into kids and create something of legacy, of lasting value. Mr. Rogers had no merch. You couldn't go buy Mr. Rogers dolls. You couldn't buy Mr. Rogers sweaters. There was no empire. It was one show, and he walked into that. And if you haven't seen that Senate hearing, I encourage you to go and Google it, because it's impressive to hear how Mr. Rogers came in and what he spoke through. He actually sang a song, and in that hearing, you see all of the senators basically all said, you sold us. And that really started what was a positive and using television for good. But again, I think like somebody like him, like his legacy, he has hit so many important and was not afraid to hit very important and radical conversations around race, around gender, around things that were important topics today, but they were really important topics back then. And he was not afraid to use his platform for good, because he was important. He wanted people to understand the basic truth that we are all loved. We deserve respect. We all have value, and wanted to make sure that he could encourage others to see themselves and see others in that way.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, if you plant the seed or even just an early start of an oak tree, the odds are you're never going to sit under the shade of that oak tree, but somebody else will.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes you taking the time to plant the seed into the ground. And so, the thing is, if you look at your life, can you be a builder? Can you invest in young people? Can you encourage them daily? Can you share what you've learned and create memories over possessions? And, if your life ended today, what would continue because you lived? What is it that people will remember for years, not because of how great of a person you were, but because of how special and valued you made them feel, and you empowered them to step out and do something? And so, as we close the episode, if we look back at the 5 anchors of the whole series, it's own everything: your choices, your growth, your life, and that revolves around character. Put others first: presence, honesty, and service. Focus on relationships. Do hard things. Build competence and stay capable. Life skills: how do you learn and grow? Be a lifelong learner. Create value. Work with excellence and purpose, because work and purpose are good. It's important that we show up, and everything we put our hand to, we do it with excellence. And then finally, stay grounded in purpose. Lead yourself and lift others, and you'll have leadership and legacy that will outlive your lifetime. So this week's challenge, keep every commitment you make. Solve one problem without being asked. Lean into one hard thing instead of avoiding it. Spend intentional time in prayer, reflection, or silence in your life, and invest intentionally in one other person besides yourself. So ask yourself at night, did I lead myself well today? And did I make somebody else better? Because I know for a fact that leadership is not status, it is stewardship. And legacy is not what you leave behind, it's who you leave better. Live for something that outlasts you, and I promise you'll have a life that's amazing. This is the You Not Me podcast. Thanks so much for joining, and share it with anybody that you know that this will be an encouragement to.